Alrighty, everybody. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate you guys making time to come over for our permanent housing webinar. So just a couple of housekeeping things real quick. If you're in the room here at MDHI, we have speakers on every table. So if you want to ask a question, just please make sure that it's a green light on the speaker. You just hit a button on the back of it to turn it from red to green. That way the folks on the phone can hear what questions you have. And this is all being recorded as well, so we can post it on our help desk after the training today. So it's a resource that other folks can access later. So hopefully everybody on the phone can hear me okay. We were hearing people kind of joining on there. I think we have over 30-some folks that called in, a good turnout in the room too. So again, thank you for being here. So real quick, I guess it would be helpful to know my name as well, huh? My name is Matt Richard. I'm a data analyst here at MDHI. This is my colleague. I'm Beth Foster, I'm HMIS training and application specialist here at MDHI. Yep. And then we have colleagues around the state at the other lead agencies. Christina Yasov, I believe Amy Vargo is on the phone as well from Pikes Peak. I think Tyler Buck was hoping to make it, and Denny Wetmore from the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, who are the Balance of State HMIS leads.
Hey guys.
So in terms of quick housekeeping, expectation setting for our agenda today, we're going to start making sure everyone knows that we have a help desk and there are resources posted on it. Then we want to review some Aaq guidance we got from HUD about project start date for permanent housing projects, and then walk through the expected workflow and data collection requirements associated with all permanent housing projects, whether that's permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing or permanent housing kind of other there. So all of the data standards and kind of workflows we're talking about are mandated and required for COC funded and ESG funded housing projects. But they also act as kind of our baseline for our non-federally funded permanent housing projects as well. So just trying to level set, kind of clear up any confusion there might be about what is expected in HMIS for these permanent housing projects, how to work with your clients, how to track the progress that they're making in their enrollments, and then how to make sure that information is captured on the reports that you send to HUD via SAGE for those federally funded projects. Then at the end, we're going to have an open forum for questions. We can go over anything that either comes in through the chat or in here in the room. So that's kind of the schedule here. So to get started, right, real easy. Our help desk is available at cohmis.zendesk.com. You can either create an account and track all of the tickets that you ever submit by logging in at our help desk, or if you email your COC's HMIS lead agency. For Balance of the State there, we have all of the emails listed for each COC. If you email us, those will all be kind of captured too, associated with your email address. But if you create that account, that you can log in and kind of see your whole history of what you've submitted. So if you have the same issue, you can kind of find your own answer in some ways without having to wait for us to respond to you. So I'll pop out of here real quick just to make sure everyone has seen the help desk, right? And this is our help desk. If you see the houses, oh, you can't see anything? It went away? Well, in the room, interesting. Hopefully on the phone, you're still seeing what I'm doing. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. All right. In the room, we're having some technical difficulties with the projector, but it's not a fun training until something goes wrong, huh? There we go. I think we're back. So I'll be careful when I move stuff around from now on. So this is our help desk, right? You can sign in here or create an account. You can submit your requests. The resources section is where our quick reference guide lives, which basically outlines almost all the things that you can do while you work with clients and enrollments in the system. Our colleague down in Pikes Peak put that together. We have reporting tutorials, Looker for those of you who have manager level licenses. So we're trying to build this out as we get out of the migration mode, right? We transferred systems in 2018, took about a year to migrate everything. Now we're really trying to expand these knowledge bases so we can help, clear up confusing things about HMIS or about our system. So it's a great resource. I recommend you please check this website out. But again, you can email any of your lead agencies, and we're going to disseminate these slides afterwards too. So, all right, so back to our Aaq guidance, right? So as we kind of developed these materials across the state, we have a statewide collaborative for HMIS with those 3 COCs. We were kind of running into confusion around specific workflows or requirements for permanent housing projects in HMIS. And one of them is project start date, which is like the very first thing that you kind of capture for a program enrollment. So what was confusing about it was that we were learning that the work that was being done in the community for those federally funded, either rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing projects, wasn't quite in alignment with what the documentation that we had was for HMIS, specifically like when to create a project start date in HMIS, right? So we reached out to HUD, who helped us clarify that for all types of permanent housing projects, and this is a section I like to call Matt reads at you. This is guidance from the federal partners. So for all types of permanent housing projects, the HMIS project start date is the date following application that the client was admitted into your project. So to be admitted means that the information provided from the client or from the referral indicates that they meet the criteria for admission. So that does not mean that any or like all or any of the required eligibility record keeping documentation that you have to do, per the interim rule, has happened at that time for the project start date in HMIS. It means that their information indicates they are eligible, they want to work with you to be housed in your project, and they're able to access services and housing through your project, where the expectation is that you have a housing opening or you expect to have one in a reasonably short amount of time. So I think the real takeaway here, and we kind of tried to simplify this HUD language, which is always fun to decipher, is that we're going for the project start date in HMIS based on the presumptive eligibility information that we're provided, right? So the client either provides that information to you directly that indicates they're eligible, or the referral that you get indicates they're eligible for your specific project. For permanent supportive housing projects, we know that documenting chronicity, they've been continuously homeless for a year, 4 more times, have a qualifying disability. That stuff takes time to capture, but it should not hold up the enrollment for HMIS project start dates. And then the client participation portion there, the client wants to be housed by your project and they're able to access services and housing through your project. So waiting on collecting every last piece of that documentation that verifies that third-party documentation of chronicity for PSH projects is not something that should hold up the HMIS project start date. So more fun Aaq guidance here. While having all that documentation is not a requirement to enroll them with a project start date in HMIS, for purposes of eligibility under the COC program for those federally funded programs, right? It's important to note that you still do need to be working to collect that documentation. That's a requirement per the interim rule, right? So you have to continue to work with that client to get that documentation. For PSH, I'm going to keep it as high level as I can because today we're focusing on the HMIS workflows and data stuff. From what I understand, there's kind of a grace period. I believe you need to document at least 9 out of 12 months of the client's literal homeless situation. And you have 180 days to do that. You do have 45 days to capture the qualifying disabling condition for PSH. So at the most high level for those COC funded PSH projects, that's kind of the general rule that I understand. You still need to be following those intake procedures to ensure compliance with that chronically homeless definition or final rule for PSH projects. And then for PSH projects, again, in particular, intake workers of your project are held responsible for documenting either the household member or head of household's chronically homeless status, since that is part of the eligibility requirements. So again, kind of a recap on the HUD language. For HMIS project start dates, you don't have to have all or any of that required record keeping documentation, but you still need to be working to capture it within that time frame. If you were audited and they needed to pull those files and make sure that the clients you are serving are actually chronically homeless, specifically for PSH. And then HUD also kind of flagged that they understand that there might be people that you enroll in your PSH project or any permanent housing project rather, where they're ultimately found, they're enrolled because of their presumptive eligibility, ultimately found to be ineligible and will be exited from your project with a destination that reflects they've been put back on the priority list for housing. So they understand that that might happen with this guidance, but it's also kind of expected from them. And also keep in mind that determining eligibility for program participants is still an eligible cost for the COC program, even up until the point where you find out that they are ineligible potentially. So just wanted to get that out there. This has been kind of a sticking point, a confusion point in our community, and as we dug into it, really around the state. So are there any questions on the AAQ stuff? I think as the PSH providers in the room, would attest to. Like, there's some nuance into calculating some of those things for chronicity, specifically around the time frames that you have to do that. But we're happy to work with you to clear up any questions you might have, even if it's a follow-up after this meeting. So, anything coming through on the chat or? Okay. So that's kind of our AAQ update on project start date, presumptive eligibility, work to capture that documentation, but it shouldn't hold up the project start date in HMIS. Alrighty. So I'm going to bail out of the slides because that concludes the portion where I read slides at you. And now we're going to pivot over to my colleague Jazz, who's going to kind of do the demo for those expectations and data requirements of these permanent housing projects in HMIS. Yeah, can you turn your mic on now? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jalea Daly with the Colorado Division of Housing. I manage the COC Permanent Supportive Housing Vouchers for the Metro Denver area. And with this guidance from HUD, what we have done at the Division of Housing is sort of made the program enrollment in HMIS part of the application process. So if and when your participant is, if you're told by One Home that your participant has been matched with a COC PSH voucher, when we review your application, we will be looking to see that they are enrolled in the program in HMIS as a part of the application process. I have sent emails out about that, but if you haven't received it, feel free to let me know before you leave and I'll get your contact and make sure that you have that. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm gonna go through just kind of the workflow in the system. This is hopefully stuff that you guys have seen before, because hopefully I've trained you. But this is our training site. So in the training site, I did go ahead and set up a situation for you guys to kind of see it in live action. At one point, I will pivot because I did make a duplicated profile for this whole situation, and I'll explain to you guys why shortly. So with every client, right, the very first thing that we do is search to see if they have a profile that exists. We don't want to create duplicates. Duplicates give us partial information of the client. We just need a full picture all the time. So always make sure that your clients exist, right? Search by name. If that pulls nothing, search by date of birth. If that pulls nothing, search by social security number, so on and so forth. In this case, I created Jesse Rocket. Oh, that I can't spell, and that's okay. In the system, here's Jesse Rocket. My client is actually going to be this one. I had to make a duplicate. Don't be like me. Do what I say, not what I do. So we pull up the client's profile. We see all of their information. Over here on the household side, we see that this person, Jesse Rocket, has a son. That son is named Meow Rocket. These are Pokemon characters, in case y'all didn't know, because I'm a giant nerd. So this is their profile. You can see that they have a child already in the household. And the idea in this backstory is that the client is enrolling with just the head of household and the child, and that's how they're going to enroll into this permanent or this rapid rehousing program. That's what we're going to be looking at today. Very, very important when you are looking at your clients. Before we ever look into a program, the first thing that we want to look at is their contact information and collecting contact information for our clients. This is just really useful across the board. So right up here is the contact tab. Under the contact tab, you can click add contact, and here are all the various options for types of contact information. You can do emergency client. You can also do yourself as the case manager. You can do, if they only have an email, you can put like the client and only put their email. Preferably any type of contact information that you can collect from the client. So I'm just gonna add in some fake information today. Oh, fake meal, no fake email at fake.com. Whatever, that's enough. Not my laptop, so things are weird. All right, we'll put in a phone number. Today is the day that I got that contact information, and you can leave a note. So like, you can say something like, client only has minutes for the first week of the month. Maybe they have a prepaid phone. And that is just to add contact information. That is so that we can get a hold of clients when we need to. We also have a locations tab that is also very important. And on the locations tab, you can put in previous addresses. And I'm going to pivot to Matt.
Yeah, sure.
To make him do this.
So in terms of, like, we're going over stuff that's not requirements, but it's helpful information to have about the client so we can both reach them with their contact info. And for location, if we're sitting down with them at our intakes or our enrollments, if we're capturing at least the city and the state of where they were last permanently housed, we can start to kind of do some mapping of where folks are coming from. And conversely, like when we house them in our projects, we can, if we just have the city and the state input into our system, we can map where we are housing people, at least at a city and kind of county level. So to add an address, right? Super easy, just click the plus button here. It'll load up. I'm gonna hit Save Changes to show you which fields are required. So it'll underline anything in red that is a requirement. So you have to pick an address type, right? If it's a last permanent address, we have that there. And then all that's, you have to have a name of the address. This could just be last permanent address. You just need to put something there. Address line 1, we don't need the actual like physical street address. So you can put, you have to put something, but NA works just fine. City, let's say Denver, state, Colorado, and then the date that you're adding it to the system, right? So March 4th. If the client doesn't want this information shared, didn't sign an ROI, we can mark things private. But if we have this information, once we hit the save changes, we can start to create maps, which is what I have loaded up here. We're starting to kind of really dig into the data as we get out of migration mode to kind of dig in and see where are folks coming from, right? So we can see from across the country where folks have indicated being last permanently housed. Or I'm sure for the folks in the room and on the phone, right, we work in Colorado. We can see in Colorado where folks experienced, say they were last permanently housed before being enrolled in our housing projects, right? So we can see the top 10, we can hover over at the bottom, oops. At the bottom, we can pick a specific city too, right? So if you want to see Castle Rock, for example, like if we collect this information, we can report on it and make community maps for everybody to show what's happening in our community. So that's kind of our pitch to, like, if the contact info is super essential to be able to reach the client. The location information is super helpful for us as we all get questions all the time. Where are folks coming from? Are they coming from out of state? If we can at least have an informed opinion on that, we can, if we capture that info, we can report on it, right? Inputs and outputs. So that's kind of our non-required workflow that we were kind of touting. There you go, Jess.
Cool. All right. So when we're looking at this family, like I said here, I have a head of household who's Jesse Rocket, and I have their son who is Meowth Rocket. These two are going to be enrolled into a rapid rehousing program. So we just go into programs. They don't have a history because they've not been enrolled in anything. And this is the program I will be enrolling them. Because I'm going to enroll them together, I am going to toggle on this group member. In order to enroll someone, and when you go for the enrollment, to enroll people as a group, they do have to be linked together in the universe of HMIS. Did you want to find? No, that's fine. So they do have to be linked together in the universe of HMIS. As you see, we have the household structure that is the head of household and the child, which means I can enroll them together as a singular enrollment. Just by toggling this on, we would click enroll. So this is where we get to like the project start date. Because of some of the things that I'm going to show you, I am backdating this to December 2018. You should not be backdating things that far. Timeliness, please put your information in much sooner than a year and a half. This is just so I can trigger things to happen. All right. So relationship to household, is the client the adult? These are all automatically generated. And then we get to the housing move-in date. Now, the housing move-in date should be left blank until the client actually moves into their location. So because of that, we are going to skip the housing move-in date. And we move on to prior living situation, where we're asking where the client slept the night before they entered into the program and how long they were there. In this instance, my client's going to be coming from an emergency shelter, and they will have been there for a year. We go all the way to here to make this make sense. So number of times on the streets in an emergency shelter or safe haven in the past 3 years. We're asking how many episodes of homelessness have they had over the past 3 years. So when you're looking at this, where your clients are coming from, the vast majority of them are coming from literally homeless situations. In that case, we just say where you come from, how long did you stay there, how long is this current episode of homelessness, which is approximate date homelessness started, how many episodes of homelessness have you had over the past 3 years, and how many months have you been homeless total over the past 3 years. When we're filling this out, for one, don't break people over approximate date homelessness started, right? We don't need the exact date, just try to get the general area. Was it around, you know, the beginning of the year for New Year's? Was it February around Valentine's Day? Was it already in Easter? Use kind of those general markers that we universally understand. And then how long did they stay there? And then approximate date. So when we're looking at times, number of times on the streets, this is every episode of homelessness. Some of the information that you guys just have to know is what constitutes a break in homelessness, right? So that is facility or institute, 90 nights or longer. 90 nights is considered a break in homelessness coming from a facility or an institute like detox, jail, a mental health facility, etc. If they're coming from transitional or permanent housing, the threshold is 7 nights. 7 nights is considered a break in their homelessness. That includes sleeping on someone's couch, sharing with a friend, at a hotel that they are paying for by themselves, that kind of thing. So you just need to know those things, that like transitional or permanent housing situations have a 7-day threshold. Facilities and institute have a 90-day threshold for those to be considered breaks in homelessness. So when you're talking with clients, you're really getting just a 3-year history. That's what we're asking them for. I know that it's not super clear what you're asking, but you're just trying to get a 3-year history. So how many episodes of homelessness did they have in the past 3 years? And how many months total have they been homeless in the past 3 years? Disabling conditions and barriers. I know that disabling condition is the first question asked, but in practice, the best practice that I've seen is that they skip disabling condition and we just start going down the list until you get one that qualifies. In order for something to be a qualified disabling condition, they must have it, and it has to be, the question that is asked is long-term. What we're really asking is it something that is affecting their ability to maintain housing, to maintain a job, maintain things like that. So like physical disability, if it is a yes, it will ask if it's long-term. In order for this to be a qualified disabling condition, they must have it and it must be long-term. The 2 exceptions to that are developmental disability and HIV and AIDS. There is no secondary question. If the client has a developmental disability or they report that they have been diagnosed with HIV or AIDS, that is automatically a qualified disabling condition. And the very last one is domestic violence victim or survivor. No matter what their answers are to this particular question, DV status is not seen as a qualified disabling condition by HUD, no matter what their answers are. This is very important information to know, though, because if they are actively fleeing domestic violence, we want to make sure that we're connecting them with the right resources. So these are actually all going to be no for her. All right. Monthly income, non-cash benefits, health insurance. If they have it, you need to cite where it comes from. For the income specifically, we do put in the amount. Reading my notes. In this instance, my client has no income, they have no health insurance, they have no non-cash benefits. It does say save and next. That is going to take us to the child enrollment, which is considerably shorter. For children, we don't ask their prior living situation. We only ask their disabling condition and whether or not they have health insurance. Also their relationship to the head of household. In this instance is the child. This client will have a disabling condition because they have a developmental disability and they have no health insurance. Those are the basics of an enrollment, and what we've done is if we look at this enrollment for the head of household, we can see all the information that we put into the system. What we're doing is creating a snapshot of what the client situation was the day that they enrolled into our program. What did they look like when they first came in? So because of that, you actually don't want to go change any of the information that's on the enrollment screen unless it was just wrong. If it changes, then we'll go over status assessment in just a moment. But just because something changed, we don't want to change it on the enrollment screen because this is the information that's tied specifically to the day that they enroll in your program. So we're creating that picture in order to then create their timeline.
Hey, Jazz?
Yep.
So that's all absolutely correct. The only caveat there, right, is that fun housing move-in date, where housing move-in date is only captured on the enrollment screen. So we're going to come back to it, but since we're saying things in case you watch this portion and decide not to watch the rest.
Continue watching, there's more to come.
Housing move-in date it's an update to clarity as of last data standards. This field is only supposed to be captured once and only once per enrollment. It's only captured for the head of household, and it's only captured on their enrollment screen.
So when we did the enrollment, we actually left the housing move-in date blank, and that is how it is intended to be per the AAQ and HUD information that Matt was talking about earlier. Your clients don't have to have a move-in date in order to have an enrollment into the program, right? In this instance, we have done that. Oh, this is why I created a duplicate. Excuse me. Where are you? Here's all the exact same information I just put in, hopefully, close to it anyway. So, as we were saying, housing move-in date should be left blank, and it's going to be left blank until the client actually moves in, all right? So in our scenario here, the client has enrolled with their child in December of 2018. They did not have any income, they did not have any health insurance, right? What we're going to say is that 2 weeks after this enrollment, Jesse Rocket's spouse is actually going to join the enrollment. So in order to do that, we're going to look at the head of household, that is Jesse Rocket. And right over here under program group members, you'll see that the son has been enrolled, but that's it. Oh, we should have done the household management. Okay. So because of that, we want to be able to add the spouse. And again, in order to add them to a program, they do actually have to be part of the universe, their household managed in the universe of HMIS. So we click manage. Over here, you can see the household members. It is a mom, it's a son. The star denotes that this is a head of household. And the idea being that you will have looked for the spouse's profile to see if it exists. And it does, it's right here. If you've done that, when you go into the head of household, you can hover over the spouse. You can click this little circle and a plus sign. You will set their member type, which we're gonna say husband. And now you have a 3-person household. So that's how easy it is to really create those household structures. And now we're gonna pivot to why I made a duplicate.
And right, take home message there was before you can enroll them together, they have to be linked together first on the front end in the system.
Right. So now you can see, right, my client, ignore the fact that it doesn't say 2 anymore. But now in the universe of HMIS, my client has a son, my client has a husband. So we're gonna look at that enrollment that was already done. All right. So this is the enrollment that we did for her, all right? But right over here, under program group members, you can see that Meowth is already active, and that is because we did the head of household and the child as a group enrollment. They had the same start date. They all started at once. 2 weeks later, the spouse is going to come in. Because I've created them in the universe of HMIS, there is this add button right here where I can add program group members. It'll pull in the household members that are not enrolled in that program. The reason I had to make a duplicate, and this is information that you need to know, is because there is a delay in the system. When you create the household structure, if you go immediately into the enrollment, this add button may not be there, and that's because there's just a delay in the system saying, hey, in this program, there's also this household that was already created. You need to pull them in. But yeah, in theory, you will have done this and it'll work fine. Mine doesn't work fine. So now that I'm going to enroll the spouse, when I go to enroll the spouse, they're actually joining the program 2 weeks later, which we're just gonna call January 1st, 2019. So they actually are going to be joining January 1st, 2019, whereas my clients previously joined into the program in December of 2018. Their relationship to the head of household is the spouse or partner. These are automatically generated. Again, you get to skip them. And then you will answer the prior living situation questions for the adult, because this is an adult that I'm enrolling, and it's just specific to them. Where were they at the night before they entered into the program January 1st, not necessarily the client. And this, you know, it's just information. JK. He does have income. So for the spouse's income, the spouse gets SSDI. Who knows the going rate for SSDI? $783. That sounds good to me. Oh, SSI. I know the mechanics of the system. I don't know real life. All right. So this is the spouse. The spouse is joining with income. We're going to indicate that they have income. They do not have non-cash benefits. They have no health insurance, save and close. This will actually add the spouse, and this is going to add the spouse to the enrollment that already is here. And if you look, you can see that the program start date for the head of household is 12/19, but the program start date for the spouse is 1/1/19. So they can be totally different, and that's fine. All right, so we're going to fast forward now to February. In February 2019, housing is going to be identified for this household. All right, when housing is identified, housing is actually going to be, they're going to sign a lease. That lease is going to be signed February 1st with a housing move-in date of February 14th. So we're going to go back to the enrollment screen, and we're going to look at the housing move-in date. If today is February 1st and my client has signed a lease that begins February 14th, what do? Anybody? Nothing. We do nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that is because February 1st, when your client signs a lease, means nothing. Your client does not move in until February 14th. That is 2 weeks for things to happen before that client actually moves in. So you don't update the housing move-in date until the client moves into the unit, regardless of having it set up, having paperwork ready, all of that stuff. Do not update the housing move-in date until the client has actually moved in. So if today is the 1st and the client signs it today, you're not going to update this. Today is February 15th and my client moved in yesterday, then you can update with the 14th.
Yep, that's absolutely correct, Jazz. I would say that we are also starting to lean into like monitoring how these fields are being captured, mostly for data quality. Whenever this is like entered as a future dated, like if today is March 4th, right? We have people accidentally doing March 4th of 2019. We're flagging all of those. Any kind of inconsistencies with how this works, we're trying to lean into like helping you clean that up. If it's future dated, we'll probably reach out to you and ask like, hey, please don't do that. With 2019 changing into 2020 so recently, we're getting a lot of like 2019, 2020 errors, right? People using the wrong date still. So all that to say, like if you're future dating move-in dates, you'll probably hear from your lead agency about it as we're starting to kind of track that to make sure it's being answered consistently. Yeah, Lynn.
If there needs to be in a day or two earlier than the lease, do we put it in that date of the move-in as opposed to the lease?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. The guidance that we have, the way that it reads verbatim in the data standards is that you enter that date the night they physically start staying in that unit, right? So if it's the lease is signed, but they're allowed to move in a couple of days earlier, I would think that it would need to be that date that they actually physically stayed, but you know, maybe taking a case note to indicate they got to move in before the lease started might not be a bad idea. Yeah.
Can you explain again how you're monitoring the timeliness there?
Yeah, so it's mostly for future dated stuff, but like with the advanced reporting capabilities of this system, we're developing reports that basically flag if you put a date into a field that hasn't happened yet, it emails us and we know about it, right? Same with start dates and exit dates. So it's a lot of accidents, right? People are doing 12/12 of 2020 instead of 12/12 of 2019. So we're trying to help drive data quality. We're trying to make sure people are following, you know, the guidance on entering these fields. But that's really all it is. It's not like a punitive thing. It's just you know, this looks like a data quality issue. How have they moved in at a date that has not yet happened? Yeah. Yep. And can you hit your mic if you have it? Thank you.
Are you going to touch base on assessments?
Yep, that's coming up.
Okay.
We have a kind of a client story outline to go over all the things, but that's on the way. Yep.
So just kind of to recap where we are. So my client enrolled with her son. Jessie enrolled with her son, Meow. 2 weeks later, her spouse, James, enrolled, and he enrolled. He had SSDI income. And what we're saying is that in February, housing was identified. It was identified in the beginning of February with a mid-February move-in date. It is now past that move-in date, and the clients have actually moved in. So we are going to update their housing move-in date on the head of household. Make sure you hit your mic. There should be one at the table. If the light is green.
Okay. So my question was, I know you mentioned before that the move-in date only happens once. If someone is evicted or whatever happens and then they're no longer housed, do you update that? And
Yep,
then also when they move in somewhere else?
Right. That's a great question. And this is something that we kind of dug into last year because we, you know, it's a scenario that happens, right? So if your program houses a client, right, they move into a unit, you put that housing move-in date, and then something happens and they lose that unit, they have to move out. Whether it's an eviction or they're just like, I don't want to stay here anymore, I'm out of here. But they want to continue working with your program. The only, like the system is calculating, there's like some system performance measures from length of time from project start to housing move-in date. The only way it can do that is to leave that move-in date completed, exit them to whatever situation they're in, right? If they leave that housing and they're staying on the streets, but they want to continue working with your program, you exit them to that temporary destination, and then you can re-enroll them into the project so you can recapture that next housing move-in date. So instead of having like multiple options to collect the housing move-in date, the federal guidance is to exit them and re-enroll them.
Can I add that's absolutely correct, but can I add just one additional scenario there, Matt?
Yeah, go for it.
So that is only if they have days of homelessness in between. So if they are just moving from one unit to another,
right,
and they have no days of homelessness, then you do not need to capture a new housing move-in date. You just keep them in the program as it was before.
Absolutely correct. It's when they lose the housing that you leave the housing move-in date completed and you exit them to whatever destination they're in and then re-enroll them. Yep. So we'll get to exits here in a little bit. There's like 35 or 36 specific destinations that the federal partners make us report on, like where folks are headed to. So let's say in the example we were talking about, the client was housed and they were evicted and they're staying in shelter, but they want to continue working with our project and they're still eligible to do so. We exit them to a shelter, then we re-enroll them with a prior living situation that documents where they were the night before that next enrollment. So it can be the very next day, you exit them, then they get re-enrolled the very next day into the project. You're just answering truthfully where they are at that time at the exit, and then that prior living situation too.
And that won't make it that we get a new person that replaces them.
A new person that.
So it's not going to show like we have an opening in our program.
Right, because it's just kind of like a lost housing situation, but you're still working with that same person. Like it shouldn't scramble anything up other than to capture that new housing move-in date that you want to work with them for, you have to have a second enrollment.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, and Julia, you got a question too?
Yeah, and my question was, are you exiting them just from their housing situation, or are you exiting them directly from the program?
So you're exiting them from the program, but part of that is capturing that housing situation that they're in when.
Okay, got it.
Right. So in my example, right, I'm exiting them to an emergency shelter, then I'm enrolling them the next day with a prior living situation of an emergency shelter, length of stay 1 day, right? Like if for PSH projects, it might have some like impacts on how it looks in terms of eligibility for them on their uploads into Sage for APRs. Find that life is not black and white and fits into these fun little HMIS boxes.
Okay.
So.
Just wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah, one more question.
Hi, this is Jesse from Denver Human Services. So I want to go back a little bit about the situation where it goes from one unit to the next one, even if it's different locations.
Yeah.
If you're working with the client that is not forcibly, but you foresee that they're going to be evicted from that, so you try to prevent the eviction, but going into another unit. another place. And they technically are not going to be going in a shelter. It's just kind of like one unit to the next,
Yeah.
but in different months.
And this to different months. So where are they going to be in between the housing there and then the housing
You're
there?
still working with them to stay in the same place, but the following month they're going to be located in another one.
Yeah, if they're continuing to work with your project and there's no loss of housing, then there's no need to exit. But, you know, we can dig in maybe in the open forum for some of these more specific questions. If it's another agency that's going to be working with them and not you anymore.
Yeah, it will be the same
Yeah.
agency.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if it's the same agency and there's no loss of housing, there's no need to create the exit. If there is a loss of housing, even if like you're still working with them, that's when the exit is required.
Okay.
But we can, again, there'll be open forum. These are all great questions. The one about what to do, specifically if they lose housing, is definitely confusing, so I'm glad it was asked. But sometimes like we run into situations that like there isn't guidance for because it's not happened, right? Like we work with clients that stuff happened. So I think we'll keep it moving now, but these are all great questions. And again, we will have that open forum at the end. So if we don't get it to, as into the weeds right now, we will at the end.
So we are back in February 2019 where housing has been identified for this client. What we're also going to do is, as an agency, we're going to be providing them with their security deposit and their first month's rent. That's information that we want to track in HMIS, and we can. Within the program, under the services that you can provide, there is financial assistance. This can be set up and tailored to your program. This was set up for me to do this. So I'm going to provide a first month's rent. The date of that first month's rent is the day that I'm giving it to this client. I gave it to them the day that they moved in. So February 14th. Sadly, the end date does not update automatically. I can't change it.
And I think you said this, Jazz, right? These are optional things.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement for these programs for the federal government. But I know that here in MDHI, some of our like larger entities are thinking about baking into their contract language the necessity to track services in the system. It's super easy to do. You can draw down on stuff. Jazz is going to get to it in a minute, but.
So if the client's monthly rent is $1,000 along with $1,000 security deposit, we're going to look at the first month's rent and put in $1,000. I can actually select which funding source I want that to draw from. I'm just going to pick one today. I don't know if that makes sense. Don't at me. Look, I don't do this in real life. I am going to include the group members because this is a funding that is happening for the group. And here there is a text field for you to leave a note. I would like to point out that it says service note above it. Everything in the system, if your text box says service note, it will be visible to everyone. Please do not put clinical case notes here or private information. Everyone in the system can see this note because it says service note.
For bonus points, either in the room or on the phone, where those service notes are displayed system-wide that other people can see?
Such a convoluted question.
So for service notes, right, in a history section of the client, that history tab, everything that happens for them, like enrollment, services, if you're taking notes associated with the service, those are visible in the history tab for external agencies. That's why we like to call out, like, don't put crazy stuff in there that only you or your case manager should know about, like, substance use thing. Clinical case notes shouldn't be in service notes, I guess, is the take home there. Yeah. Thank you.
When I'm putting in a service, I actually don't have a choice for the funding source.
Yep. It's not a requirement, but it's if you want to like put in, say you have like, a bucket of money. Well, you do have a bucket of money probably to draw down on, right? We can build that out in the system, and that could be something that you basically report on. Like you're providing $1,000. So when you're on a report, you see your funding source is now $1,000 less. So you don't have to do it, but you can.
How do I get that added in?
You got to give us this info. Yeah.
You reach out to your lead agency and they can work with you.
I got you. Yeah, your lead agency can set this up for you. Like I said, this is tailored specifically to show you guys these optional features because they are very useful to you. I will also show you a service actually at the end of this that you can show this drawdown, that you can show this breakdown for any given time period. it'll be fancy.
To be transparent, not a lot of housing providers track services in the MDHI COC anyway. It's not a requirement. It's one more thing you got to do, but it certainly is functionality that exists that we're happy to work with you on if it's valuable to you. Cool. Awesome.
So in the system, what I've done is I've gone ahead and given them a service of the security deposit and the first month's rent. That is something that we will be tracking in HMIS in my made-up scenario. That's not real life, so if it doesn't add up, sorry. That was in February. That's what we paid for. So what we're going to say then is that in March of 2019, the HOH actually is going to get a job. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is not change the enrollment, right? Because the enrollment took place in December of 2018, and we want all that information to stay correct. But right over here on the right-hand side, you can see status assessments. You can also click the program level assessments to access either a status assessment or an annual. The quick button is this add button, and you can pick which one it is, status or annual, and who it's for. In this instance, it's my head of household that is getting income. But something is actually, because of her income, she will also, because she's a job, she also will be getting employer-provided health insurance. That employer-provided health insurance is also going to cover her dependent, which means there are things changing for the child as well. So essentially, it's just who's going to be toggled on is who is something changing for. We're just notating that there was a change. It's a status assessment.
It also doesn't hurt to leave them all toggled on to indicate there were no changes for that person either. It's not a problem either way, I would say. But
it says project start date. It's really like status assessment update. Why is this project? I don't know. Cool. So this is in March. So none of the client's disabling condition information has changed. All of this actually cascades over from the information that you most recently put in. So all of this is coming over from her enrollment screen, which means you don't have to do it again. And the only thing that you need to update is what changed. In this case, the client got income. We're going to say that's $1,500 a month. My client also got SNAP, which with non-cash benefits, you do not need to indicate the amount. The amount is only for income. My client also has now employer-provided health insurance. That's going to take me to the child because those are the things that changed. Looking at the child's enrollment, like this information again, cascades from the enrollment screen. As it cascades over, the only thing that's changed for the child is that they now also have employer-provided health insurance because they're covered under the parent.
I'm going to say something real quick too, Jazz. So we have paper forms for annual assessments and updates that are certainly there for you as a resource, but with the data cascading function, kind of doing a lot of that legwork for you in terms of the data entry, it's moving all those fields you already answered over to the next screen. You're also able to, you could just print the enrollment screen for the clients out of this window in your browser and have them look it over and let you know what has changed instead of having them fill out a completely blank set of papers, right? Like the system already has the info they provided last time. If they can look it over and let you know, this has changed, I now have income from this source, what have you. They don't have to fill out every last, blank field on that form since the system's going to do that cascading for you. It's an option that is available to you.
So we're showing that now the client got insurance or health insurance and got a job in March of 2019. If we fast forward a couple months, we're going to get to June of 2019 when the spouse decides that they are going to no longer live in this unit with their child and spouse. They're actually going to move out. Things didn't work out. Household structures are very fluid in our community, but they're actually going to exit the program and they're going to move in with their friend. In order to do that, we just need to look at the person who is exiting. In this instance, it is James Rocket who will be exiting the program. It's this very innocuous exit button. And you can select one, some, or all the exit. In this instance, it's only the husband that will be exiting. So their exit date is actually going to be in June of 2019. Sure. And we're going to notate, this is what, I almost called you Frank. This is what Matt means by exit destination. essentially when you're exiting a client from your program, if you know where they have gone, you can notate like where they have gone. If you have no idea where they go, there is an option down here that says no exit interview completed. Like if your client just ghosts, you have no idea where they've gone, it would be no exit interview completed. There is an other option. Don't ever use other. If you can't find where the exit destination fits into this, please email us at the help desk and we can find the correct place for that to be indicated. It's not other, hardly ever. And by hardly ever, I mean like that 0.25%.
It's there because it technically can happen, but with like 36 other options, there's probably a better one to fit it in. Another is seen as a temporary destination, or you know, not necessarily a positive outcome for your overall program stuff on your APRs and capers if you're ESG funded.
Is that true also for no exit interview completed?
Right, yep. No exit interview completed is what to use. If the client is MIA and you have no record of where they went, you have no evidence to support any other option. No exit interview is 100% the appropriate response to select, but it will be flagged as a data quality issue you won't be able to fix, right? And there's an expected number that the federal partners expect to see in that category. So it is a negative. It's viewed as a negative outcome, but it's, you know, we have no evidence to support anything else. Yeah. Question over there?
So I'm just going back to the guidance from HUD.
Yeah.
So you exit or you enter someone into PSH, you find out they don't meet that chronically
Correct.
homeless status. How are you going to exit them without that affecting your APR?
So that was the last slide, and the last language they included back to us was they understand that is going to negatively impact your scores, and there's no way around that. But that's the guidance. That's what the expectations are for these projects. They don't want the documentation to be a barrier to getting them enrolled. Sometimes that chronicity document takes a while to track down, and their guidance is to enroll them into your project and, you know, work with them on gathering the documentation, certainly. If they're found to be ineligible, unfortunately, the guidance is to select whatever situation they are in. If it's a negative one, or a temporary one rather, that will be counted on the outcome of the project. But we are here to explain the expectations of the federal partners, not necessarily to justify them, right? So, you know, it's not what has been happening. That's why we kind of flagged it in the beginning as that Aaq guidance we got, and it took a while to get back from them too.
So there's no way to indicate right now in an exit that that's what happened.
Yeah, you can for the coordinated entry processes and referral stuff. That'll be a little bit specific COC stuff. Right? So we're at Metro Denver. We can work with our one-on-one team, our coordinated team about that. Same for the other COCs. But these are like canned options that are a part of these federally funded projects. This destination is the only option that we have right now. We have permanent housing committees here in MDHI that are talking about like what fields or value adds that we could put in the system to kind of try to explain more about what happened. I think like we've talked about like housing status at exit, or if there's like a narrative section to explain what, for your uploads into Sage, certainly there is a narrative section where you can explain we enrolled them per the guidance of HUD and not wanting to make those documentation things a barrier. But then we found out after collecting that documentation, they were ineligible. So you can kind of explain why those outcomes look that way. But unfortunately, with the documentation and the data standards for these projects, that's the only field that can indicate the exit. Yeah. You're not wrong. Yeah.
Also for one home stuff, we can talk after we end the recording, and I got you. All right, so we're in June, the client is leaving. In this instance, we actually don't get to talk to James himself to find out where he is going. However, Jesse, the spouse, has told us that he is going to be leaving to go stay with his friends, and that he has not been given a time frame that he needs to leave that, which means his is going to be staying or living with friends on a permanent tenure. Because he has not been given a deadline or how long he can stay there, that's what we would select here. Again, all of this information cascades over from the most recently input. In this instance for James himself, it is just from the enrollment screen. So you just need to update whatever has changed and is different at exit, because again, we're creating snapshots kind of along the way, right? So for James, nothing has changed, still has no disabling condition, still gets SSI. I guess that doesn't make sense, but just ignore that, overlook it like it didn't happen. Still doesn't have non-cash benefits, has no health insurance. But we can exit him from this housing program.
Right.
He's now exited. If you look over here on the right, Jesse and Meowth are actually still active in the program.
And I think what's cool about the data cascading, right, is that when she created that exit, she didn't really have to do anything other than select the destination and the date, because she was doing good record keeping and documenting what had been changing over time, right? So if you're doing a good job of communicating with your clients and capturing these status updates, when it's time to create the exit, you're really just doing one or two things. It's a really quick process.
So I'm actually going to go back to my head of household because we're now fast forwarding to December of 2019. This is what I mean by delays. It still shows that he's active. We know that we just exited him. It's just the thing, there's a delay. So pretend like this says exited. So we are back at the head of household. We're going to fast forward to a year. It is now December 2019. And in December 2019, my client's been in the program for a year. We've updated the things that have changed, but from March when my client got her job to now, not really much has changed except in the month of December. In the month of December, my client got a raise. So as you can see down here, an annual assessment is due. Clients who have been in the program for a year or longer are required to have an annual assessment. That annual assessment needs to be dated 30 days before or 30 days after the anniversary of the enrollment. Since we are in December, and I know that this client has an annual assessment that is going to be due, if I find out December 1 that my client got a raise, there's not really a reason to do a status update because they already have an annual assessment that's due. So, and the annual assessment and status assessment look exactly the same. One is just annual, so you should do it every year. The other one is what you do when something changes.
Right. And the annual one is the one that gets flagged as an error on your APRs as a data quality issue, right? So that's the one that's flagged on those federal reports. Len?
I want to make sure I heard you right.
Yeah.
We can actually do the update a month before and a month after. I thought it was 2 weeks or something.
It's 30 days before or after. So I mean, in practical terms, it's much easier to track it one-to-one with the anniversary date, but technically it won't be flagged as an error if it's 30 days before or after the anniversary date of the enrollment.
Yep.
So on the annual assessments, now that we're changing the enrollment date to not match up of when they move into our PSH, so our annual dates are no longer going to match up with our annuals on our housing, correct? It's going to be
talking about like kind of the other systems. You might have to use like a lead or something like that, or
right, which is easy because when our move-in date was the enrollment date, then it would pretty much match up unless they moved, middle or whatever.
So for HMIS, it's 100% tied to their project start date, not their household move-in date. Yep.
Okay, and then do you know if it's been fixed because it's about to be that month where when you guys added in the husband, which now he's already out of, but his annual technically should be separate from the household's annual?
We were digging into that guidance before this training, trying to get at that answer, and it's, as many things.
We still don't have it?
It's a little bit convoluted. Like we were hearing, like do it based on the head of household, but then if they don't have it based on theirs, there might be an error. So I think we'll have to continue kind of digging into those details and work with agencies when those things happen, because people do enroll at different times.
So right now, though, is it going to still show up as an error on our report? Because it was mine that had that error.
To get it out of there. Like we can work with our vendor and HUD to figure out how we have to collect that information in a way that doesn't result in the error. So I don't know the answer right now, but I think that we can definitely figure out a way to make that not show up as an error. We just need to know what date to flag that annual for that person that came in after.
It's coming up, this is something that came up on our radar that we know of, and it's just because I can't say like, oh, the system doesn't work, because we don't actually know what HUD wants. When we reach out to HUD, the answer is slightly conflicting and we're not really sure. So we're still trying to dig in to get some kind of clarification around who needs an annual assessment, when it is due. Is it based on the head household's enrollment? Is it based on that individual adult enrollment? And then once we have that, we will work with our vendor to make sure that the system reflects what HUD wants.
Yeah, it's also good to point out too that for annual assessments, right? Like part of the goal of our projects, our permanent housing projects, is to work with clients to try to increase their income, access to income, non-cash benefits, health insurance. On APRs, when it's doing your income progress breakdowns on who in the project increased their income over the course of their stay, it's only based on annual assessments. So people that have been enrolled in the project a year or more, on your APR, that's what's being like kind of flagged as like whether they made progress or not.
Right, so like on my example, my lady went in and 3 weeks later, because the head of household was due for an annual, it was tagging saying that we were missing an annual for her. If you remember, we had a lot of emails.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing an annual for her, but literally her annual was 3 weeks after she enrolled into HMIS. Right. So that's how we got around it.
Yeah.
Well, next month they're coming up again, so that same couple. So it's gonna be.
Let's go down that path again next month.
Okay.
I think we'll figure it out for sure. Like it's where life doesn't fit into the boxes in our system in the way that, you know, we all wish that it might. But we can work together to figure out a way to make that not an error on your report.
We're gonna get an answer. Yeah. Sooner or later. All right, so this is the annual assessment for my head of household. Like I said, I found out December 1st that the client is getting a raise. So what I want to do is go ahead and I'm going to date the annual assessment. It's the 1st. I just found out it's going to be an annual because we already have one that's coming up due. None of their disabling conditions have changed. The only thing that has changed is we will update this to say 2,500 instead of 15. It will automatically update down here. The client still has SNAP. They still have employer-provided health insurance. So that's that annual.
And you're seeing on the screen too the prompt to enter the housing move-in date on the enrollment screen. So it does kind of build in for you that the only place to capture that is on the entry screen. So I just want to point that out too.
But it's okay.
Yeah, you're good.
December 1, so I can backdate. Nothing has changed for the child. They are still being covered by the health insurance. We're just going to give them an annual because they've been there for a year. And that's that. So that is December. We did the annual assessment. At this point, the client has had income for 7 or 8 months roughly. The client then got a raise. They maintained that raise and maintained their income for another couple of months. And at that point, the client decides they no longer want to be in my rapid rehousing program. They're going to exit. They found a rental by themselves that they can maintain and they want to leave, which is fine. So we would again click my very fancy exit button. I'm going to toggle everyone on because we are exiting the head of household and the child. So the February last month. So their exit happened sometime in February. They are actually going to be going to a rental by client with no ongoing housing subsidy. They're going to be paying for this rental by themselves. None of this information has changed. None of this information has changed from December of last year. So save and next. My head of household is exited. The child is going to the same place. So a rental by client with no ongoing housing subsidy. Again, for my child, nothing has changed. So with that, we have exited the clients from the program. So what we want to do is kind of go back and show you this like fake timeline that we made up. For the client at enrollment, they enrolled in December of 2018. They had no income, right? They had no health insurance, and this is the snapshot that we can see. So then if we look, we can also look at the assessment then, and we say, well, this client also they had a status assessment in March. What happened then? Oh, it looks like they got income, so we can show that they got income. If we look at the annual assessment that happened a year after the enrollment, we can see this client now actually has more income. They're getting more earned income. We don't know how, why. It doesn't necessarily specify that it was a raise, but that's what happened. If we look at her exit screen, we can see that she exited to a rental for herself with no ongoing subsidy, maintaining that income. So with each of these, with each enrollment screen, the status assessment, the annual assessment, the exit, what we've done is create a picture on a timeline, and those pictures on that timeline tell the client's whole story. Right, that's all the information that we need to know, and it all lives right here.
Yep, and this is more importantly is what the story that is told to the federal partners for those federally funded projects, that's what they see too, right? Like they're gonna see all of the information that you're capturing in the system is the only information that they know about on those federal reports that go to them. Can we go back to assessments real quick, Jazz?
Yeah.
So we didn't get into notes very much about like taking case notes. But I do want to call out that after you exit clients from your project, you still have the ability to do follow-up assessments. This isn't a requirement, but if you want to like be checking in on your client and see how they're doing, you can do the follow-up assessment. It's all the same fields, as the annuals and regular status updates. And you can also continue taking notes in an enrollment that's been exited as well. The only thing you can't do is continue providing services because the project is over. There's no way to provide more services in this project. So that's it. Those are other optional things I wanted to point out. We didn't really get into files. You can upload files directly into Clarity, stuff like that. But that's really like at a high level for all of our permanent housing projects, whether it's PSH, rapid rehousing, permanent housing, other. This is really the workflow that is expected, especially if it is a federally funded housing project. Like it's not expected, it's the requirement, the mandate for those. Yeah, Julia.
Can you or Jazz also go over what it would look like for everyone if a person left one agency or did a transfer?
Right.
And went from one agency to another agency?
So yeah.
Just so that people would know what that looks like for
Right.
in-state transfers that do occur in PSH
And
programs.
this happens frequently enough. There's actually documentation in the data standards for it, right? So like our documentation is really focused on the database and the data that we need to collect. There's all kinds of other documentation on the policy that lives a little bit outside of our lanes. But for the transfers, if the client is in your housing project and they're going to, a better housing project is another housing project rather is a better fit for them, you would exit them, again, whatever the situation is. If they have found housing already, you leave that housing move-in date completed, you exit them to that permanent destination, and then you would re-enroll them. It could be the next day even to that other project. So the first enrollment has to end. The first provider would do that exit. Positive outcome if they've been housed, negative if it's still waiting to happen. The next enrollment would happen at the second agency. They would reflect the prior living situation of where they were the night before. So if it's a housed situation, even though it makes them look ineligible, you answer that housed situation for the prior living. You would flag in Sage that it looks ineligible, but it's really a project transfer. And besides that, like the workflow is the same, right? If they have a housing move-in date, I believe you would leave that filled in with the date that they were housed. And then you continue working with them. You know, the devil's kind of in the details surrounding the nature of the transfer. But I think the takeaway is exit them to where they are in that moment at the first agency, enroll them with a prior living situation that reflects where they were the night before, and then continue on working with them like you normally would. Yeah.
Is it service issue?
I've been harping about using mics all day, and I turned mine off. Jazz is going to go through a service report, just since we showed you how to track services. Anybody in the system can pull reports, including like service reports or those federal reports like APRs or program rosters. We have some resources on our help desk that go over how to do that. They're pretty user-friendly and intuitive to use once you do them once or twice. So, but really after this, I think we're kind of opening it up for questions once Jazz shows you some of these reports.
Just want to show you guys that if you are tracking services, like I showed you guys in the system, that there's a lot of reporting out that you can do for it that'll show you the things that you and your funders would like to know. For example, I just ran this report for how many times have we used this first month rent, like how many unique clients, how many services, number of days, so on and so forth. Because I've done it as a web page, you can actually click these numbers. They are clickable and drill down, and it will show you exactly who these are applied to. As you can see, like these weren't actually counted as funding because I did one group fund for their first and last month's rent, or first month's rent. But you can see here how much it was, what grant did it come from. There are some other reports that it's just taking a good while to load. There it is. So we can break it down by this was the first month's rent. I want to know who it was, when they got it, how many times they've gotten it. There's other reports that you can run that will tell you, here's the amount that you have spent out of this grant, here's who it went to, and here's how much you have left. All of these things are reportable if we put them into the system, right? We can report out on anything that we're putting in. So if you have a grant amount, and you want to track how much of that is used, how much of that is left over a given period of time. If you give us that information, that's stuff that we can help you guys set up so that you can use those optional features that are very, very useful to you. And that's my spiel.
And I just double checked on your question, Julia, because I wasn't super confident on the move-in date for the second enrollment if it had already been housed. what I'm seeing in the data standards manual is that if in the event a client is transferred into a PSH or rapid rehousing project, having already moved in to a permanent housing unit, their project start date and housing move-in date will be the same date for that second enrollment. So the second enrollment, the start date is 1-to-1 with the move-in date per what I'm seeing in the guidance. I'm going to double check with our vendor and with HUD because I'd like them to, sometimes like they have documentation that I like to push back on a little bit. And we'll, in our follow-up message that we distribute, that'll be included. Yeah. All right. So that kind of concludes our song and dance up here in front of you all. Are there specific questions that we want to get into, whether it's about HMIS? We can do our best to dig into anything else that pops up that might be questions that live outside of HMIS. But we're scheduled until 3 and we're happy to be here and kind of have an open forum or tutorial things that either anyone in the room or on the phone would like to see. We didn't go over ROIs, right? Like this, we have 201, which all the new employees go to. But if there are questions about ROI, collecting ROIs for clients, that release of information, that means it's okay to share their information or to mark client records private. Like now is the time for really anything that you all want to go over, specific to the housing projects or just HMIS in general.
I just want to say in the beginning of this, we are a statewide training.
Right.
This is for everyone in the
Right.
state. A lot of our partners on the phone are from other COCs.
Yep.
So if you have one home specific question, if you'll just hold those until we end the recording, then I can answer those for you.
Yeah. Yep.
Because they'll be MDHI specific.
Well said, Jazz. Not seeing a lot of movement in the room. How about on the phone? Not receiving the email. So Shelly Tate's not receiving the emails that were talked about at the beginning of the meeting. What emails? I'm trying to remember back to the beginning of this meeting and my brain doesn't go back that far. What emails are you talking about, Shelly? We can certainly make sure that you're on any list that you might not be right now. We're going to follow up after this training with like some specific questions that folks had for one home, and then for that permanent housing. Didn't catch the person's name. Shelly, I will follow up with you after directly to see, to try to get to the bottom of that. I'm not sure what you're referencing, but we can figure it out together. All right, well, we're not going to make you sit here until 3 o'clock, but again, we're happy to talk about it. Anyone on the phone, we'll kind of do one last call for stuff. Otherwise, we can end the recording and give you guys back some time in your day.
And I can answer coordinated entry questions.
Yeah.
For one home.
All right. Do a slow count to 5. I'm going to shut it down.
Going once.
All right, friends. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. We hope this cleared up some stuff, but if there's still stuff you want to talk about, send us a ticket. Flag us after the meeting here at MDHI. Otherwise, we're here to help. Yeah.
Stop sharing. All right. Thanks, everybody. You want to end the meeting?
You guys hit stop recording first?
Yeah. I did hit stop. Oh.